So good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you here at our Open Consultation Hour. My name is Giulia Giussani, and I'm Digital Innovation Manager here at IDSA. Together, I'm here with my colleague Thorsten Hülsmann, who's the Chief Financial Officer of the association. So the purpose of today's session is to make you understand what IDS is and to make you understand why we think this is an important milestone towards data sovereignty. Yeah, so we've structured the Consultation Hour with a first introduction to IDS, and then we'll be very happy to answer your questions. So Thorsten, would you like to explain a little bit what IDSA is?
Hello, this is Thorsten Hülsmann speaking. Hello, everyone, also from my side. Unfortunately, you cannot see me because currently I have some issues with my computer and my camera. Sorry for this. So as you know, International Data Spaces Association is an international initiative with the aim to provide a global standard for data sovereignty. The whole endeavor started almost 3.5 years ago in summer 2016. The association was established with some 18 founding members. And in the first year, we have set up some initial research projects together with Fraunhofer Society from Germany and together with these other 18 founding members. In the meantime, the initiative grew. We have currently 114 or 115 members from 20 countries. And if we count all people who are actively contributing via our working groups, via our task forces, via different research and development projects, there are more than 350 people actively contributing to the activities of IDSA. Next slide, please, Julia. International Data Spaces Association, as I said, is active in various countries, and as we have also a growing membership base from countries outside of Germany, we started our IDSA hubs creation and establishment 1.5 years ago, and for the time being, we have a mutual collaboration with some research and technology organizations from abroad, and they are also responsible for facilitating the activities in the countries in question. So we have, for instance, in Finland, VTT, who are acting there as a knowledge transfer agent or a hub facilitator. We have the Czech Technical University in Prague. We have Innovalia in Spain. We have Institut Mines Telecom in France. We have Cefril in Italy. We have TNO in the Netherlands, and we have CERT ITI in Greece, helping us to to bring our programs and projects ahead. Altogether, as I said, the whole organization is structured in several activities, and these activities are the core of today's open consultation hour. So Julia and I will very briefly try to focus on the main structures and main activities, and then afterwards we will have 40 minutes time to answer your question. I think this introduction is necessary because we do not exactly know what is the knowledge base of all of you, and therefore we will quickly run through. Julia, next slide, please. And then I think it's so up to you again.
Yeah, thank you, Thorsten. So we've already mentioned the purpose of IDSA is to ensure data sovereignty. But what is data sovereignty actually? So we all know that data are an important asset and that data can unlock a lot of business potential. But why is this difficult to achieve? It is difficult because once you share your data, it's difficult to keep control of the data you shared. And this is exactly what data sovereignty is. So that's the ability to exclusively and sovereignly decide about the usage of the data that you want to share as an economic asset. So that's exactly the purpose of IDSA. The IDS concept is how IDSA wants to put this into practice. And the data spaces are like clean rooms where data can be shared and manipulated in a secure way, thanks to governance processes and also usage constraints. Thorsten, would you like to explain this concept a little bit better?
Yes, of course. And by the way, now my camera is working again. So hello, everyone. Sorry that I had the starting problems. Okay, so as Julia said, data sovereignty touches, well, at least these three topics: unlimited interoperability. As you understood, IDSA is working towards a standard for data flows between all kinds of data endpoints. And when you ask what is a data space, at the very end, it is the sum of different connectors relating or linking different data endpoints. But we come to this topic of a connector later on. Then trust between different security domains is important, with comprehensive security functions providing a maximum level of trust between different parties in a data ecosystem, whether it is a small one, a closed one, maybe between only several companies, or a very big one together with organizations who might not even know each other. And then the third point, governance of data. There are several technologies in place, for instance, like usage control and enforcement of different governance policies for data flows. So these are the three important topics which deal with this question. Next slide, please. And well, at the end, what IDSA came up within the first 1.5 years, it is the reference architecture. Well, it is somehow the Bible of data sovereignty and IDS data spaces, setting the framework conditions. And as you might have seen already from our internet publications, the reference architecture is available in the 3rd edition. And soon in this year, there will be a reference architecture, IDS reference architecture 4.0 as the 4th edition. Furthermore, the trust framework and scheme for data sharing is essential, and also the coordination of operations for essential data sovereignty services. These three elements enable at the end open distributed data ecosystems or marketplaces, ensuring data sovereignty for the creator of the data. And I think this is utmost important to understand, and also this balance which Julia had in the previous slide is important to understand. So on the one hand, free flow of data to unleash the potential of data ecosystems, but on the other hand, to secure data sovereignty for the creator of the data, at least to use data as an economic asset. And then proven data provenance for the user of data, audit proof if requested, and also based on certain values when it comes to transparency. And these are mainly linked to the FAIR principles, which you also might know. Next slide, please. Well, this is one example how a data space could look like. As I said, various data endpoints, whether they are on a sensor base, whether they are on a cloud base, whether they are on a machinery running in a factory or in a company, these are data endpoints. And well, some relations are maybe not necessarily needing IDS data communication, but others do. And this is showcased here with the white dotted lines. And you see also these blue dots here. These are the so-called IDS connectors, which in sum then define data spaces. And you also see here that there might be in between certain data usage constraints, These are showcased or displayed here by these blue boxes. And by proposing these or proposing a specific software component, these IDS connector, then different data endpoints can be connected, as well as individual enterprise clouds and on-premise applications or individual connected devices, at the end guaranteeing data sovereignty in sum. And maybe also as an explanation, a data space as such does exist, of course, but in sum it will be hundreds, thousands of data spaces which are on the top level linked via the IDS reference architecture on a very generic model. And this is that to ensure that different data spaces, for instance, on company level, on use case level, or on domain level, at least understand each other and foresee the same protocol. Maybe 2 words on this IDS connector. It enables access to sovereign trusted data sharing ecosystems. There are 4 security profiles foreseen to satisfy all needs, from a quick data sharing to a really comprehensive security requirements. There are also standardization efforts going on since more than 2 years. And finally, at the end of last year, the DIN spec 27070 was published by the German DIN Institute, defining a security gateway for sharing data and services and a reference architecture model, as I described, describing the framework for this. Well, then the specifications for implementing a connector based on container management technologies are provided from the developers community of IDS on GitLab. And then also until now, there are several implementations available in different scenarios, for instance, embedded systems, mobile devices, or client-server solutions. And also important in this whole sovereign data infrastructure, there are certain certification needed. For the time being, it is possible to have an IDS ready certification on component and organization level, and soon there will be also a formal certification scheme in place, which is then provided or providing the right certifications for the relevant connectors. Next slide, please. Yes, then we are coming to usage control. Only 2 or 3 very fast graph views. What we are witnessing at the moment, or also in the past, is a provision of policies which are needed in the data ecosystem. What in the future will become more important are obligations. For instance, if I say, okay, you can use my data, or you could have access to my data, or I share at least the meta information of my data with you, but the usage constraint will be to delete it after 3 days, or you are allowed to use it for certain purposes. If you want to go ahead, you have to pay, I don't know, 2 cents per interaction. And these 2 topics, access control, will in the future merge into usage control. Next slide, please. And these usage control activities, as I explained before, are not only dealing with access to data, but then are also giving different possibilities for this usage policies. And this will be then at the end the technology enforcement of certain usage policies. You might, if you are interested in more details, on our internet homepage, there is a paper which was published end of last year, usage control technologies in IDS. So please have a look on this paper. There you find detailed explanation on this. Next slide, please.
Yeah, thank you, Lars. Thank you, Thorsten. Now, before we move on to the Q&A part, I would like to cover 2 more topics with you. The first one is the roles that can be found in an IDS ecosystem, and the other one is the current status of the development and adoption of IDS. because I know that's one of your major questions. So to explain the roles that can be found in an IDS ecosystem, we like to use the metaphor of the motorway. So in a motorway, we can find vehicles which represent our data providers and data users. These vehicles, so these participants, join the IDS ecosystem. But why do they do that? Putting aside the data monetization or interoperability reasons, the main reason why a data provider joins the ecosystem is to stay in control of their data, so the data sovereignty topic. On the other side, the data users have the benefit that they can always prove that they had the access and the right to use the data. But in order to do that, vehicles need to have a road where to drive onto, and that's the role taken from the infrastructure providers. So we have identity providers, certification providers, and also some providers of the technological components like the connector. When you go on a trip, sometimes it happens that you need to stop at a gas station to refuel, or that you might need to buy some food. And that role in an IDS ecosystem is the role of the service provider. So you might find providers of a broker service or vocabulary providers and providers for the App Store. On top of that, we have the role of IDSA. So like a municipality, the role of IDSA is to orchestrate all of this. So to safeguard the value propositions, setting the rules, and ensuring that trust is there in the ecosystem. Another view to the roles in the ecosystem is pretty straightforward with this slide here. So you can see the pink dots, which are the data provider and data consumer. And you can see in the middle, especially the service providers, like the broker service provider, the clearinghouse, the App Store provider, and so on. And you can also see the different types of interactions that there can be in the ecosystem. So interactions focused on the metadata, the data flow itself, and so on. With this next slide, yeah, you can see where many of the IDSA members position themselves in the ecosystem. So we see SQS or PwC in the area of certification, or you can see IBM or engineering in the data provider part. So I hope with this picture, it should be clear which roles in the ecosystems are there. And to move on to the current status, I think it's good if Thorsten explains the two main areas of activities of IDS.
Yes, thank you, Julia. So you see here on the left side the IDS service and technology offering. This is mainly the achievement of the activities within the last 2 or 2.5 years. So as I said, the IDS reference architecture model describing the scene and the framework for all this. Then there are certain activities in the developers community with implementing elements of this data ecosystem and these, for instance, trust services, which are mandatory. Also the certification criteria, which are defined in the working group certification. Also, the task force legal framework is working on standard contracts, which are necessary for these. And then also the other groups are working on operational processes to support the basic trust service. So this is, the service offering. And now, on the other hand, we have to make sure that companies and organizations who want to come up with commercial products and services based on IDS will adapt and proliferate on these issues. And therefore, we have several well, activities in place. The gray ones, I already explained the hubs. We also have communities which are meeting frequently to discuss, for instance, the uptake and also the USP and added value of data sovereignty, for instance, in logistics, in the health industry, or in manufacturing production. I remind you to the newly launched IDS community industry, IDSI. You will have information on our homepage on this. Then we also have certain test beds, and here I want to mention the first test bed in place at Fraunhofer ISST, where certain components, connectors, for instance, could be tested against the related requirements. And we also have certain competence centers. These are organizations who deal with a very specialized topic, for instance, ontologies or metadata description. So these are also activities going on. And I want especially mention the already mentioned launching coalition, as there's now the need to come closer to commercial products and also to, well, define certain procedures. The launching coalition is in place since beginning of this year, and Julia will describe the activities of the launching coalition in a minute. But as you see, this is a little bit the cycle. We have requirements from industry. We have the IDS offering, the adoption and proliferation activities, and in a circle, the requirements from first implementations, from first commercial uptakes are then given back to the working group reference architecture to, well, discuss and also foresee to bring them into the next version of the reference architecture. So we have always these interchange between new technologies, between new offerings on the one hand, or on the other hand, new requirements coming from real the use cases and commercial implementations. Julia.
Yeah, thank you, Torsten. So to explain a little bit more what the Launching Coalition is, that's a group of IDSA members that are pioneers willing to make IDS a reality. So these companies have some use cases. Yeah, you can see them here. And they, their purpose is to set the essential services of the IDS ecosystem so that it is fully operating by the end of this year. We've structured the work and we're coordinating the activities through three main work streams. The first one is the Creating Business Cases work stream, where we focus on the development of the business model and all that is related to the real offering of the solution. We also have a second work stream, which is focused on implementation. That's the Building Solution work stream. And that has to do with the real technical implementation of the solution. For example, in this work stream, we've organized together with our partners, SPS and Fraunhofer, some test beds to test the components and interoperability. And the last work stream is the rulebook writing work stream. That's a really important work stream because all the companies gather together and try to set the final agreements that will make IDS really possible. So in this work stream, we define the last processes to combine with the reference architecture. And we have, for example, the version management, the process for the admission of new members, and these kind of topics. So maybe we'll have the chance to speak more in depth. I would like to ask you to provide us some questions. We can let you speak. You can maybe raise your hand, and we will be happy to explain and answer your questions.
Will Gaia X and IDSA be defining and or driving the specific use cases for each of the EU data spaces?
Well, this is obviously also a question for me, Dave. Thank you for asking this question. From my point, a challenging part of this question is what are data spaces which are described in the EU data strategy? It is more, from our understanding, an announcement, and it is not precisely described what the European Commission understands as a data space. We think, of course, as International Data Spaces is the only organization which really is working actively on the data spaces approach, including data sovereignty, that the IDS endeavor and initiative is the most important starting point for this future data spaces. And then these 9 described data spaces from the European Commission are those data ecosystems working in the 9 verticals or 9 described domains. So definitely Gaia-X and IDS are a part of it. And let me just see if I could share one slide which I want to show to describe this. This is now a little bit challenging because it's not in our, yeah, here it is. Now the question is, how can I share it? Let me just see. Andreas, am I allowed to share my screen?
I think yes.
But it's not working. No, it's not working.
Stop sharing. Thorsten, maybe you can try again.
Yes. Let me wait. Now it should work.
There it is.
Can you now see a blue graph view? So Dave, this is these typical architecture stack where you have these 4 layers. Below the network and devices layer, then the cloud edge infrastructure, data sharing infrastructure, which is, as we described, a virtual infrastructure existing of different IDS connectors. And then here you have the platform or market-specific solutions layer. And on the top, you have these verticals or domains. And now you see that the data sharing infrastructure, this is where IDS comes into place, and the cloud edge infrastructure, this is where Gaia-X comes into place. And if we will understand the data spaces which are described in the European data strategy as this, what we see here, then definitely IDS and also Gaia-X are a very important element of these data spaces. Please, if you are interested, at LinkedIn, I recently posted a longer article on this data spaces discussion. Please have a look. It was co-written by colleagues from TNO and from Fraunhofer. There we tried to focus this. But this is our understanding of the EU data strategy, and we are at the time, for the time being, reaching out to the European Commission for a better understanding what they really meant with the data spaces.